The next questions coming in are kind of around the data. And so in terms of how much data is stored on the Skydio drone itself, as well as where does it go for post-processing afterwards?
Sure. So there are a few different categories of data. The first category is for your real-time 3D mapping, right? So I'll pull out my little friend here. So you're always taking in visual data through these 3 cameras on your Skydio 2. Now that visual data gets pulled into your NVIDIA Tegra TX2 chip, and it builds a real-time 3D map of the world and flies through it. That data never leaves the drone. Now, the next category of data is your media. Okay, the media is going to be captured through your 3-axis gimbaled camera here on the front. Okay, it's a 4K color sensor, and that's going to get stored on an SD card here under your battery. And that's how you'll get your data off. Now, those images are going to be geotagged, so that then if you want to post-process, all you've got to do is take that SD card, upload your data into your Bentley or your Esri or your Pix4D system, and then you'll be able to build your models the same way you always would.
Great, thank you. How well does the Skydio or the X2 handle contrasting colored materials, so black versus gray versus white, and shadows versus bright sun?
Yeah, there looks like there was a follow-up question to the last one. In terms of accessing the 360 video, you'll be able to access that through Super Zoom, which again is that feature in that Skydio Autonomy Enterprise Foundation where you can zoom all the way out and see all the navigation cameras in real time. So you will have access to that. And then, Shannon, would you just repeat for me that last question?
Yeah, absolutely. How well does the Skydio handle contrasting colored materials, so black versus gray versus white, and like shadows and bright sun versus bright sun?
Yeah, the Skydio has been extensively trained on all different light environments. And every time that we go out flying, the algorithms get a little bit smarter. And so there are some really impressive cases, actually. I think the most impressive one and the hardest challenge in machine learning is to identify just a plain white wall where it's textureless. That tends to be really difficult, and that's a challenge that your DJI and your Parrot drones encounter all the time because they try to do optical flow where they've got a single downward-facing camera and they're trying to figure out what the world looks like through that. Well, you can't do it through one camera, and you can't do it without really advanced artificial intelligence. But our vehicles are able to use pattern recognition. They're trained in a lot of different environments, and they're much more robust in these complicated light environments like shadows, darkness, looking into sunlight than any other drones out there. So we're really excited about it, and that's why for the Skydio 2, we had such an aggressive warranty, which is that anybody who crashes it, we replace their drone as long as they were flying under our safe flight guidelines.
That's fantastic. A few questions have come in terms of enclosed spaces and the capabilities. So can you talk about the kind of the close quarters performances that have happened and what's in place to when people are in close quarters, like crawl spaces, collapsed buildings, factories, things like that?
Yeah, definitely. It's amazing. And when you fly indoors and close to a lot of metal structures, like a collapsed building with rebar or something like that, you really need a drone that is impervious to GPS denied or RF interference. Right? So you look at a lot of other drones that are dependent on GPS to tell them where they are in the world and a magnetometer to tell them which way they're facing. Well, GPS is not that great when you've got a roof over your head. Really hard to talk to a satellite. Those drones will start drifting, right? And a magnetometer is really hard to calibrate because it's a big compass. It's trying to pick up magnetic signals from the north and south pole of the planet. As soon as you park one of those drones near metal, you start to lose precision and have a lot of issues. That's how a lot of crashes happen on manual drones, is they'll go back into what's called attitude mode, and as a result, they start drifting, and it takes a really skilled pilot to keep that bird in the air and prevent it from flying way off and crashing. And so because we have the Skydio Visual Navigator on there, your GPS and your magnetometer are just one piece of the puzzle that lets the drone know where it is and what decisions it needs to make. And that computer vision system can keep you from hitting obstacles, even in those really complicated environments.
That's awesome. Thank you. Looking at the time, we have so many questions that aren't answered, but in honor of time, we want to ask one last question. And I will say, if your question was not answered directly on the webinar, they'll be provided to our speakers today, and you can certainly follow up with them as well. So our last question that we'll end with today is, how is Skydio interacting with the FAA to make sure that these autonomous flights are legal?
Oh, vigorously. We work really extensively with the FAA, and any further questions, I would refer everyone to our head of policy and regulatory affairs, Brendan Groves. Brendan joined Skydio about 6 months ago from the Department of Justice, where he ran the FBI and the DEA and DOJ's entire drone program, and has really, really great working relationships with the FAA. We're constantly working with them on approving all kinds of things, from beyond visual line of sight flight to even short range kind of tactical flights. And one example of that is in Chula Vista, we were part of the integration pilot program, which was put on by the White House to partner private sector companies and technology providers with public sector actors to try and find new ways to use drones. Now, one great way to use drones is in public safety, and the Chula Vista Police Department has been a fantastic partner to us in really pushing the envelope of what a Skydio can do. A few months ago, they were approved by the FAA for a tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver that lets them fly up to a certain distance away from their operator and below a certain altitude beyond line of sight. And that's amazing, because what that does is let them fly around behind a building and search a backyard if they need to, without sending an officer in where you might end up with a violent confrontation that you don't want. And so these feel like small incremental steps, but that's an absolutely revolutionary waiver. We like to think it's the first true beyond visual line of sight waiver, because it doesn't require anyone to go and be a visual observer on the side, which isn't much of a waiver at all. So again, we're working very closely with the FAA, and we're focusing on the permissions that really unlock a new use case and a new concept of operations, just like in Chula Vista, where both officers and suspects are going to be a lot safer for that waiver.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately,